challenge of communicating across this whole different group of people that we've had to face in the past.
In this exercise, the Dutch command the air, Hungarians the land, Swedes the sea. Non-NATO countries are represented too. This man is a general from the Ukraine. The point is to show the world that future peacekeeping alliances need not be all NATO and need not be dominated by the U.S.
I think that the whole Yugoslavian situation have learned a lot.
Flew into Gioia del Colle Air Base along with an all-party group of MPs. He used a brief visit to the current home of the RAF's #1 Fighter Squadron to announce that more British warplanes would be brought into action. There'll be 4 more Harriers to join the 12 already in southern Italy, and 4 more Tornadoes, as well as a second tri-star refueling.
Surrey. Trucks loaded with urgently needed food and medical supplies. The bandits ambushed it 5 kilometers from the town. This time the police escort managed to drive them off.
It's a huge problem. I mean, we're trying to get food into 2,500 refugees here, and so far they have been supplied by chopper from Tirana, but it's not enough. So we asked for a convoy of 4 vehicles with adequate police. The police have been very good.
So for the moment, helicopters remain the safest way to bring in food for these people. But it's not enough. These bread deliveries simply don't meet the people's needs.
Adriatic has announced that more warplanes, Harriers and Tornadoes will shortly be deployed as reinforcements. And he insisted once again that air power was doing severe damage to what he called the Serb war machine.
We are weakening that machine very substantially. Day by day we are disrupting the violence, and eventually we will get people home. There's no time limit for us, but time is running out for Milosevic.
Many of the targets being hit are part of Yugoslavia's infrastructure. Bridges over the Danube and now over the River Sava are being systematically destroyed. But NATO did suffer a major embarrassment. One of its missiles headed spectacularly off target and hit a house in Bulgaria. No one was killed, but Bulgaria is demanding an explanation.
It's the best their hosts can provide. A leaking, dark and disused warehouse on a dockside. This is the British forces' induction to the Balkans. Their first order is unambiguous and strictly enforced. No one's to leave the building. Greece is a NATO member, but here in Thessalonica, its allies' colours have to be hidden from public view. For these soldiers, though, their attention is concentrated further north. Off the coast, anchored anonymously, a Royal Fleet auxiliary ship, laden with battle hardware, waits for Greek permission to dock. If there is an agreement to send in a peace implementation force, these will be the tools for the job. Bridge layers will be essential. NATO intelligence says the Serb army has mined and set explosives on all bridges in Kosovo for demolition. On the cargo deck, hidden by diesel fumes, some of NATO's key ground force weapons, self-propelled guns and Challenger battle tanks, more than capable of taking on Serb armour, but NATO, suitably defensive, calls them peace enforcers.
British battle tanks arriving in the Balkans, yet NATO still insists they're only here to take part in an eventual peacekeeping operation inside Kosovo. Yet their arrival tonight is a political statement of intent, because if there's no compliance from Belgrade, then this squadron of tanks will inevitably become part of the ground force operation of this war.
But for the moment, for all of these soldiers, this is a venture into the unknown. They've been deployed on an operation for which the final orders have yet to be written. Colin Baker, ITN, Thessalonica.
It's understood that Britain is also to deploy its largest and most modern warship, the helicopter carrier Ocean. The Russians may be offering Mr. Milosevic an olive branch. From NATO, it's still the gun. Graham Leach, Sky News.
Belgrade's air defences put up a barrage of fire, attempting to protect military targets on the outskirts of the capital. The 36th night of NATO destruction against targets in Yugoslavia. Novi Sad to the north, the second largest city, has borne the brunt of repeated bombing. It's where one of the country's largest oil installations is located, singled out by NATO as a high-priority target. The alliance attempting to starve the military of fuel. Despite NATO claims to have destroyed the majority of Serbia's fuel, it's difficult to assess how much impact it's having on the mobility of the armed forces. In sustained attacks on road and rail networks, NATO's objective is similar, to restrict the military's freedom of movement, both inside and outside Kosovo. The latest target...
The 10 B-52s could be an ominous sign for the Serbs. The planes are equipped not with cruise missiles or other precision-guided weapons, but with 500-pound gravity bombs that were used in the Gulf War and in Vietnam for carpet bombing. Now they may be used to attack big targets such as sprawling military bases. The B-52s are the first of about 300 more U.S. planes joining the NATO force pounding Yugoslavia.
We will start to attack for more hours, more targets, and for more directions.
A major focus is fuel. NATO planes are going back to re-hit refineries and oil depots.
Earlier, Serbian TV played an interview with the military's head of air defences. Despite more than 5 weeks of bombing, he said the system was still intact. NATO says it's winning, but also admitted earlier this week that Belgrade's integrated air defences are still functioning. Paul Royal, BBC News.
So far around this capital, an eyewitness took these home video pictures. The smoke trail marked the launch of a ground-to-air missile. 50 NATO bombs and missiles landed on or near military targets during a 12-hour period. The raids continued through the early hours, especially around the military airport, where NATO believed there'd been a build-up of Yugoslav Air Force planes. These are the sort of warplanes NATO has been trying to find and destroy. The pictures were taken last summer at Podgorica base during an Air Force display. Now the air base has been heavily damaged.
Certain that any impact is made on the threat that poses?
Well, certainly the pictures, these were being shown on Yugoslav TV, basically to say that NATO bombing had not really touched the military capability of Yugoslav forces. However, we know that that isn't really the case, simply because if their surface-to-air missile network and radar chain was still fully operational, how come NATO has, in effect, air supremacy? They're able to operate over Yugoslavia within...
For the 4th time since the campaign began, Britain has announced an increase in its commitment to the air war. 4 more Harriers and 4 more Tornadoes will join the hundreds of aircraft already operating in the conflict. On a morale-boosting visit to HMS Invincible in the Adriatic, the Defence Secretary admitted he was buoyed by the news that splits were appearing not only within President Milosevic's government, but also within his army. But he stressed there'd be no easing down of the campaign.
We believe that air attacks, both in Kosovo and...
on the left side of the screen that are targeted at other aim points. Rica airfield complex that occurred on Wednesday, the 28th of April. The fact that we conducted this large-scale attack in addition to increased operations against fielded forces in Kosovo reflects our clear intent to intensify the air campaign. Air defense radars and numerous aircraft and helicopters parked in revetments, apron areas and open field areas.
This is the biggest bomb dropped yet, a 5,000-pound bunker buster on a tunnel where the Serbs were believed to be hiding aircraft and munitions. If it performed as advertised, this is what it looked like. With 10 more B-52s bound for a forward base in England, and with 325 more strikes planned for today, the air war is gathering momentum. When Serb police tried to set up camp in this factory, it was struck and struck again, leaving nothing but a smoking ruin. The Serb military is by no means broken, But as tanks get picked off one by one, U.S. intelligence officers see increasing evidence it is starting to sag.
A prisoner reported, for example, that 7 people had deserted from his platoon. My assessment is that there are increasing morale problems in the Serb military.
The air war that is lighting up the Yugoslav night is costing the U.S. about $40 million a day. And some precision-guided weapons, like the air-launched cruise missiles carried by B-52s and these satellite-guided bombs being loaded aboard B-2 stealth bombers, are beginning to run low. But Pentagon officials say there is no shortage of laser-guided bombs. And just yesterday, at a port in Germany, a U.S. ship offloaded fresh supplies of bombs and missiles bound for Yugoslavia.
We are not anywhere near running out. We could fight this for months and months.
Back with more.
B-52 heavy bombers have left Barksdale, Louisiana for England loaded with unguided gravity bombs. But the Pentagon insists sending old-fashioned dumb bombs does not signal it's running out of smart weapons.
We are not even close to being out of precision munitions.
Nevertheless, the retiring general in charge of the U.S. Air Combat Command says B-2 stealth bombers are critically low on some of the newest satellite-guided bombs. And critics are worried the Pentagon could run out of cruise missiles and other standoff weapons that afford the greatest safety to U.S. pilots.
They're going to have to fly directly over the targets, encounter surface-to-air missiles, and anti-aircraft fire. And that means dead Americans. So the president had better get on the stick here and fill up these ammo coffers.
The Navy says it has more than enough cruise missiles to make up for any temporary shortfall in the Air Force. And while the Pentagon admits it's low on some of the newest precision bombs and missiles, it insists it's just a matter of revving up the production lines, which it's doing for bombs used by the B-2.
We are now in the process of tripling the production rate from what it was, and it'll be tripled very soon.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon showed it still has more bombs it can call on if needed. Here, a 5,000-pound bunker buster is dropped from an F-15 on a tunnel at the Pristina airport, presumably destroying aircraft and equipment trapped deep inside by previous strikes.
Coming off the target, now maneuvering, making sure as he's looking out as well that he doesn't become the target himself, and the bomb at this stage is in flight. It's a direct hit on the hangar. There's a secondary explosion, and you can see some of the material blowing out of the hangar as it comes out there. You can now see, if we just freeze the frame there, that the target has been totally destroyed. Next clip, please. This time, we're looking at the airfield from a slightly different direction, as I mentioned earlier. The attacks that happened previously were on this part of the airfield, and an attack that's already gone through has hit the dispersal area, and the one we're about to see, the target marker, linked in the T of the dispersal area and apron there. Again, the crew are maneuvering, the pod is tracking the target, and they themselves are trying to make sure they don't become the target. The bombs are in flight, and the two impacts that you see there, right in the middle of the target, creating an extensive crater, which will certainly prevent fixed-wing aircraft from moving around at that airfield for a while. The next clip I want to show you is the Mure rail river bridge on the border between Kosovo and Serbia. Okay, clip please. Valley here with distinctive river area here, wood on this side, and if I can just draw your attention to a tunnel which is there, marked at the bottom part of the screen, and it comes out this side of the plateau. The town of Mure is over here. The target, as we'll see it, is back to the left-hand side of the town. So now we're looking at the tunnel, and now we're looking at a still from another aircraft, not the attacking aircraft, showing the distinctive picture of the bridge. This is the attacking aircraft locked onto the bridge at one end. Again, the maneuvering, the pod is slewing, keeping its track on the target, and the bomb explodes exactly as where the crew intended it to. Quite an extensive plume coming up from that. And as far as the line of communication is concerned, that will certainly be disrupted over a number of days. The final target is a bridge at Kokinbrod. At the moment, we're looking through the front, the tiled pod of the Harrier crew, probably about 10 miles or so away. Quite difficult to see the target at this stage, I think you'll agree. Distinctive dam at the top of the screen and a river running all the way through the center of the screen. The pilot is now starting to close with the target, and as he gets closer, he'll be able to pick out some damage which has already occurred on the bridge, and also pick out some of the detail of the bridge itself. So we can see here, slight hole in the middle of the bridge, and you might just be able to make out the spans of the bridge, which the pilot has been able to pick out as well. He's now tracking the center of the bridge, starting to maneuver. And once again, an explosion right in the center of the bridge, a direct hit. Again, as a line of communication, that's an area that won't be available for a very long time.
That is a B-52, a gigantic aircraft used in Vietnam and, of course, in the Gulf War. Here you see it. I think this is a practice in the Nevada desert, but that's what it would have looked like going down over Iraq. And if you were a Serbian infantry battalion that had been hiding in a forest for the last 5 weeks, and that hit you, I think you'd be seriously depressed.
Tirana, Albania.
You know, maybe around Belgrade right now, they're starting to look up at the sky, see if they see parachutes deployed.
The first question to Shelton from reporters after his visit in Tirana was one the Pentagon has been hearing a lot. When will the Apache helicopters fly?
The Apaches are here, and when they're trained, they're ready, and whenever we decide, it'll be a time and place of our choosing.
Shelton wasn't the only high-ranking official to visit troops in Albania. French Prime Minister Lionel Jospin toured a camp with 300 French soldiers who arrived in Albania this week on a humanitarian mission.
Quarters building in downtown Belgrade. Let's see that video, please. Attack against the Avala radio relay towers located just south of Belgrade. And this video was also taken during the attacks on Thursday. The Serb forces in Kosovo. These included the railroad bridge at Ušće and the highway bridges at Kokinbrod, Triestnik, Raška and Bistrica. The following is an image of the Bistrica bridge after our attack.
To add to the squadrons of heavy bombers attacking Yugoslavia. They've been called for by NATO's Supreme Commander. But because America is running out of cruise missiles, the B-52s will be armed with so-called dumb bombs, which are not laser-guided. Fears have been raised that dropping unguided bombs from high altitude could mean more accidental civilian casualties. The Americans have promised to minimize the risk. Gary Lloyd, Sky.
Fights bound for Yugoslavia took off in what is a round-the-clock operation. General Shelton, who had Friday visited US forces in Albania, said NATO had fully anticipated a long, drawn-out campaign.
There's no real surprise here. When we went into this campaign, we knew that we were going into an environment in which we'd have to be prepared to do whatever it took in order for NATO to prevail, and we're convinced that we can and will do that.
What it's taken so far is about 12,000 sorties by NATO warplanes, a substantial portion of those from Aviano.
We are convinced that the air campaign is accomplishing the objectives that we set out for it. We plan to stick with the air campaign. We will not be diverted from that, and our intent is to prevail, and we feel that we are confident that...
An attack against fielded artillery gun.